could just encourage some of the girls. If you're in that moment where you feel like, I can't do this, I think I'm going to throw in the towel. God maybe asked me to do this once, but he doesn't want me to keep going when it's this hard. I would just encourage you, keep obeying. Allow him to hold you up. Allow him to be your strength and your source. Allow him to speak life over you. Keep taking steps of obedience, even when it's the last thing you want to do, because he is creating something in you. He's birthing something in you, I would even say. And as you stay the course, he is so worthy to be trusted that the fruit that you're going to see on the other side of your obedience is something you cannot even imagine, but just stay the course and trust him. He is going to hold you up. He is going to heal you. He is going to use it for your good. And so just keep going. Don't throw in the towel.
Hey girls.
Hey
good
everybody.
To be together. I am joined by our Guatemala Campus Pastor, the beautiful Whitney Louder. Welcome her to the girls and welcome. Hi.
Thank you so much. Hi, girls.
Love you so much. Love
Pastor
you.
Oneka. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you
so
for saying
excited to be
yes.
here with you all.
You're a legend. You're an icon. You're a moment. You're the woman of the hour, of the decade, of the century. And I'm so excited for the girls who know you to get to hear from you today. And I'm so excited to introduce you to the girls who have not met you. You're one of my favorite people on the planet. You're stunning. You're brilliant. You are strong. You are courageous. The way you love your babies, the way you love your husband, the way you love Jesus and build God's house with this like effortlessness and this ease and this grace. It is so inspiring. I didn't tell you this, but I was talking to you on Sunday before church, and just a conversation with you, I could feel the presence of God. Like I left the conversation, I didn't tell you this, but I was at a loss for words because I was overcome by the glory of God just by having a conversation with you. And it inspired me where I thought to myself, I want to have that fragrance. I want to have that aroma when someone leaves a conversation with me. And so I just wanted to honor you and thank you for being who you are. And thank you for your yes. And I think about this journey. This is my introduction.
Oh my goodness.
Where I just brag about whoever I'm talking to.
Can I brag on you for a second?
No.
And just say
I love you.
That all of the things you're saying, I'm so grateful, but we have learned them from you and Pastor Earl, from being in this house, in this church. I feel like I don't recognize myself today, not because we're perfect. We are like growing in process, but thank you. Thank you for leading us and going before us and being our example. Because we wouldn't be the same people if it wasn't for being planted in this church house and for your leadership. But thank you for these words. Oh my goodness.
Thank you for staying planted. I can speak for any leader of any business, any organization, just anyone who holds any type of leadership title. When people stay with you and they stay by your side through the highs, through the lows, when people can become unoffendable, can become grace-filled, can become quick to scrub their hearts and quick to just stay like teachable and tender. There's nothing like people who have run the race with you who can't be talked out of running the race with you. And that's what you and Nate are. You're like, we just had coffee the other day and we were all talking about together. I think the reason why our bond is so tight because we all know that that we don't have a plan B.
Yep, absolutely.
Like this is what we're doing. We're called to build the church.
Yep.
No matter how hard it is. Shout out 2020. It was the most difficult time of leadership in my life.
Seriously.
But we made it.
Yes.
And no one has guaranteed us that what we've said yes to is easy. But because we're called, we can't be bribed, we can't be swayed. And I feel like it builds this camaraderie and this like brotherhood, sisterhood that we have both of our families together. And we are so grateful to get to do this with y'all for all these years.
I'm so grateful. I can't believe it's been as many years as it has.
How old were you when you and Nate first stepped into Shoreline City?
Oh man, that's crazy to think about. I was even thinking about, but stepped into Shoreline City was before we were married, when we were engaged. So it must have been 12 years ago.
Wow.
13 years ago. It wasn't that long after we, launched in the Angelica, but different season of life completely for us, different season for the church. But 12 or 13 years we've been planted here.
And look what God has done.
God is so faithful.
I remember you guys came to our house. I'll never forget this. It was like a core memory, but we were just starting to get to know each other, and Ben Stokes, our campus pastor at Frisco, kept talking about y'all. We had met y'all. We knew you were amazing, but he was like, this couple is so special. So I remember we had you over for dinner, and we got salads from the salad bar at Whole Foods.
At Whole Foods.
Yeah. Yep. And there was these crispy, there was a crispy thing, a salad topper.
Nate did it.
Yes,
he's really good at making
salads,
it.
and I was forever hooked on that Whole Foods salad. But I remember sitting at our dining room table, laughing, talking,
that.
and we had no idea. We had no idea what God was going to do.
We had no idea. We were just like, I can't believe these incredible pastors are like meeting us and having us over for dinner. But we didn't know all that God was going to do, but we knew that his spirit was drawing us.
Wow.
And was like, I have something that I'm doing. Stay planted, plug in, and trust me. And so we didn't know, but we knew he was doing something.
Right.
Yeah, we're so grateful.
I'm so glad. I'm just so glad that y'all said yes and you stayed the course. I feel like we live in a season of life where it's so easy to eject when things don't go the way we planned, when our feelings get hurt, when we feel misunderstood. I feel like, I don't know what it is, and not to sound like an old head, but it feels like today people leave so fast.
Yes,
you're right. They leave
right.
relationships, friendships, churches, jobs, so quick. Yes. And obviously, if God has called you to leave and start something new, by all means, go for it. But it feels like without conversation.
Yes.
Which is wild to me. When you can be in relationship with someone, and then all of a sudden, they eject the relationship with no conversation.
Yes.
I don't know what
right.
that is about culture.
It feels like a new, almost like an epidemic of our culture.
Yes,
to leave easily. And like you're saying, of course there's season changes. Of course there's spirit-led moments that lead us to make a change. But I agree that it is something in our culture that we have not always been perfect in, but it's something that we've learned in this house, the power of staying. And trusting God in the staying, because staying is not always going to be easy. And I think that's what it is when we don't have our mind made up beforehand. And we leave it a little bit like, well, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how I feel.
Right.
We'll see later if I'm still feeling how I'm feeling right now, if I'm still excited about it, or if I still feel all the feels. But the problem with that is no matter what thing we say yes to in this life, there's going to be moments when it doesn't feel good, or when it's not easy or comfortable, or we don't have the feels. We might be chasing a certain feel, and no matter what. And so if we are allowing ourselves that, we'll see.
Exactly.
There is going to be a moment where we're not able to stay the course, we're not able to stand firm because we haven't decided.
Wow.
And when we leave it that way, it would be the same in a marriage. It's like, if we're like, we'll see.
We'll see how I feel.
We'll see if I'm still, if everything just goes perfectly and you never, mess up or make a mistake, which is obviously not going to happen because we're all human. And it would be the same in staying at church and staying in the calling that our God has asked us to run in. There's going to be moments when it would be easier to not. It would be easier to leave. It would be easier to throw in the towel. Easier to say, I'm going to switch to something else that isn't stretching, or something else that I know and am comfortable in, something else that doesn't, call me out
or cost me
or require so much of me. But those are actually the moments I feel like God is preparing us for the next level. Wow. And so when we run and we throw in the towel, we don't realize that we think we're protecting ourselves, but I actually think we are robbing ourselves of the growth and the beauty and the trust and all those things that come with that next level of surrender. We think we're saving ourselves, but we're actually robbing ourselves of that, the fullness of what he has for us.
And I don't know what it is, and I'll get to the scripted questions that we have for you that we thought about as we had this conversation, but I want to stay off script for a little bit longer.
Let's do it.
But I think about the women that some of the heroes of the faith and just women that I admire that have been in ministry or leadership or married for 30, 40 years. Yeah. None of them have had comfortable lives. Anyone that's a hero, pretty much all heroes, you don't become a hero or legendary or do something noteworthy with a life of just only comfort.
You're right.
There has to be difficulty involved and stretching and doing what you don't want to do, but still doing it in order to reach that greatness on the other side. But for some reason, when things don't go according to our plan, Like it could be anything from like the moms out there who are listening right now, who you had a birth plan where you're like, okay, I'm getting into the hospital.
Yes.
Or I'm going to have my baby at home or whatever, because it whatever works for you.
Whatever
like
it is
have
for
it in
you.
their home. Some people have it in a birthing center. Some people have their babies at the hospital. Some people no medicine. Some people medicine. You win no matter what you do.
Right.
You just got to be obedient to what you feel that you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
But sometimes you have this plan. You have the doctor that you picked out. You have the playlist that your baby's going to be born to. You have your outfit, your robe. You have your baby's outfit, your baby's going away outfit, your husband's going away outfit. You have everything ready.
The snacks.
Snacks. You have your snacks. You have your pillow. You have your
cute like
PJs.
jammies
Exactly. Like you are ready. But then you get to the doctors, to the hospital, and then it turns into this, you end up with an emergency C-section.
Yes.
That happens sometimes. And sometimes I've felt and talked with women who feel like they didn't win or they feel discouraged because they had this plan and it made them think they missed it because it didn't go according to plan.
Exactly.
And then I remind girls all the time, I'm like, you already won. No matter how you brought this baby into the world, you already won. Don't beat yourself up if it didn't go according to plan. But we get married to these plans and it happens all the time. It didn't go according to my plan, so I guess I'm not called.
Yep. Or I guess I'm a failure.
Exactly.
Or I guess someone else would be better.
Exactly.
To do it. You're so right. I feel like we rob ourselves because we love our plans. And I feel like whether we're super organized or a little bit more go with the flow, everyone likes things to go how we plan them.
Exactly.
Everyone likes our expectations to be met.
Yes.
And it's not bad to have a plan, but I love what you're saying, that when the plan becomes the goal and the most important and the priority over obedience, over surrender, over trusting God, that's when we end up in a place that we never want to be. And we're missing out on the things of God.
Exactly.
Because the truth is that we can be the best planners in the whole world.
Right.
But it's still not going to compare to the plans that God has for us.
Right.
And I mean, I can't remember right now. Oh, it's in Ephesians, the scripture that talks about how God can do more than we ask, think, or imagine. And I feel like if we're limiting, what we're doing, how we're spending our time, how we're mothering our kids, how we're juggling the things that God has entrusted to us, if we're limiting it to our own understanding, to what we can think or imagine, we are not giving him the space to come in and do so much more and be God. And we can live feeling like failures.
Exactly.
Because when our plan is the win, when ultimately it's like, no, obedience is the win. Trusting him is the win.
Somehow our plans have gotten elevated.
Yes.
Or our picture, because I'm such a word picture person and I'm very visual. I'm like, okay, this is how it's going to go.
Yep.
And then when it doesn't go according to my picture, it can throw me also.
Yes.
But I love what you're saying as well, which is like obedience is the win, not like making our plan bigger than obedience.
Exactly.
So
And giving him room to do what he wants to do.
Exactly.
And I also feel like it allows us to walk in so much more freedom.
Yes.
Instead of condemnation, because I feel like we can all relate with that.
Yes.
Feeling like I'm just not enough.
Right.
Or I'm failing.
Exactly.
Or I'm not as good as.
Right.
But so often we're using the wrong measuring. It's like because I didn't live up to my plan or someone else's plan or what someone else is doing, when really it needs to be, was I obedient?
Right.
Did I trust God? So.
Exactly. I remember when during the pandemic, which we talked about before.
Crazy.
Bless. I remember you've had a couple times while being in Guatemala, getting the girls up to speed. You and your husband lived here in Dallas. You were a nurse, he was an engineer, and then God called you basically to another part of the world. And we met we had like a phone date or like a FaceTime. I'll never forget this.
I remember.
And you guys were sharing your heart that you're like, had positioned your life to be able to live in another part of the world to tell people about Jesus. And then we had it on our heart to have churches all over the world.
Yeah.
And so we had this holy conversation, and then it ended up where we landed where let's go to Guatemala. And a lot had happened before that, but I'm like fast forwarding it. But I remember when you guys moved there, like now we see you guys, it's like crazy. Nate on Sunday is singing in Spanish, like a professional opera singer. You like preach fire Spanish, like the fire of God comes upon you when you speak Spanish. It's wild and it's so beautiful and so holy. But to think when it was a FaceTime call, And then to think that I remember the time you called us and you were like, it's lonely here.
Yeah.
We don't know anyone. We don't speak the language yet. We're going to go to Spanish school, but we're not fluent yet. And you're like having dinners at random people's houses and having random people, strangers to your house. Like you adopted your teacher. She adopted you. Like, but it was very lonely at first. Like now you look at your Instagram, you have this like full life. You're surrounded by all these beautiful ladies. Your girls are surrounded by all these beautiful aunties and just growing up loving God's house. But I remember we had a phone date and you guys were like, this is hard. This is lonely. We don't know anyone. And you could have left then because it was not easy. And it was not the plan for you to be lonely. It was not the plan for the way that some of the things rolled out.
Right.
But why didn't you leave? Like, why didn't you leave when it was hard? Because then you had another opportunity when Zika came. Zika, how do you say it?
Zika. Yeah, the virus.
Which everyone was telling you to leave, and you didn't leave then. Then you totally had every right to leave during the pandemic because you could barely, like, buy food. Like, you had to stand in line hoping to buy one egg. It was crazy town. You had to stay in your house. Like, I mean, we all were on lockdown, but you had, like, even more stringent, I feel like, an experience during the pandemic than we did when it came to personal freedom. But I say all that to say that's at least 3 times, at least. I could name 100 more where you could have just left. Like, why did you not leave the first time when it was hard? And how do you think that gave you strength the other times? Like, talk about it.
Yeah, it's crazy thinking about all those moments.
I know, it's emotional.
And you're so right that when we're looking at somebody else, the highlights, the Instagram photos, we can think, oh, those things just happened.
Yeah.
Or I want that. And so I'm just going to do a couple things and it's easy.
Yep.
But there's a process behind every single one of those beautiful blessing and wins that you see. But why did we not leave? That's such a good question. I feel like to summarize, I would say that we had reached a point when we went where it was so clear that this was what God was asking us to do. We weren't doing it for another reason.
Right.
And it wasn't to please people.
Yes.
It was not for a title. It was not for any other reason or accolade or thing that we were chasing. And I don't say that, to say we did everything perfect or our motives were always so pure. We had to learn, but we did have to reach a decision and a conviction where God himself is asking us to do this. And we had to have a decision going into it that he would be the one to change it.
Wow.
And nothing else can be. I don't think I could have put that into words then, but looking back, he would be the only one. His word is what could change it. And we have to be able to, have that conviction so that when things get hard, we don't allow the hard to change it. Only his voice can change it. And so I would say that already having that decision, I have decided to obey because the wind is going to come and the waves are going to come and the pain is going to come and the loneliness at moments, again, that's not forever, but the moments of loneliness, the moments of fear. I mean, the Zika virus, the different things when I was pregnant, so many moments of people being like, you are crazy.
Right. Yes.
This is crazy. And at the end of the day, we felt such a conviction of, okay, God, are you trying to tell us something? Do you want to change it? Should we leave?
Yes, right.
Like, this was your idea in the first place. And so clearly, like, nothing has changed.
Wow.
And we had to make the decision of, okay, if he's the one who asked us and he's the one who's telling us to stay, we have to trust that he sees the big picture and all the things that are so hard to see right now.
Wow.
And looking back, there's now the advantage to be able to look back and know he was so faithful.
Right.
Like in all those moments, like in the loneliness at first, in the cultural change, in the scary virus, and the health of our children, the pandemic, and the crazy curfew, and not leaving our house. There was a lot of moments of how is this going to be okay? I can't see it.
Right.
But looking back, he saw it and he knew. And I'm so grateful that we trusted him instead of leaning on our feelings.
Whoa.
Because our feelings can be such liars.
So deceptive,
They can be so deceptive, and they're not good counselors. They're not good at guiding us, because now on the other side, having trusted him and stayed the course, and of course not being perfect, we've made so many mistakes as well and learned, but having trusted him, the fruit and the blessing on on our family, on the church, globally, on our marriage. It is beautiful to be able to see on the other side, but also pushes us forward knowing there's going to be another moment. There's always another moment
that's true.
of trusting and surrendering, and that's going to encourage us to continue down that path the next time.
How can girls learn from you to not second guess when things get hard? Because I feel like the minute something gets hard, we start to second guess ourselves. We start to lose our confidence. Like, what would you say to the girls because something's coming our way for all of us.
Yep.
And how can we have something in us like that? If you were packing us on a trip and this adventure called life, and you wanted to send us with something in our, in our proverbial suitcase to make sure when it got hard, we didn't automatically think God's failed me. He doesn't love me. He's not real. He's not kind. Like, what do we need inside of us, or what do we need to bring with us so that we cannot be so easily moved?
That's so good. I feel like simple, but knowing the word of God is important.
Yeah.
It is important because when our feelings lie to us, we have to be able to fall back on the truth. And if we do not know the word of God or don't know where to turn, open up our Bible, be like, okay, I feel like fear is speaking really loudly to me right now.
Yes.
And so I need to find those scriptures that talk about, do not fear.
Yes.
And be able to speak and put on worship music that declares the word of God to combat the feelings and the fears. I feel like having the right people around you
That's so good.
are so important because the voices matter.
Yes.
The voices matter.
They do.
And, we can't control every voice. We can't control everything that everyone is saying, but the voices that we are giving space and authority in our life really, really matter. Because I've seen, friends and people who've been taken out because they are giving weight and authority to the wrong voices
all the time
who are not seeking after the same thing.
Yes.
And it takes us off course so quickly. So I would say the word of God, being surrounded by the right voices and authority in our life to be able to cling to truth, even when it gets hard. And even when we want to second guess what he's asked us to do.
That is powerful. You're just dropping all kinds of gold.
It's the best. I love getting to do this with you.
I'm going to ask you some questions that we wrote down as a team because one of the things we also wanted to talk about, and I feel like this has been thematic throughout our conversation anyways, which is like stretching, saying yes when it's hard, not giving up. And one thing that I love about you is you have like it feels like endless capacity. And I feel like as women, we are like chief multitaskers. We are good at a lot of things as girls, and we can get a lot of stuff done. But I feel like something that I can say for most girls who are listening to this is we all want to grow and we don't want to stay the same. And you have allowed the Lord to evolve you and stretch you and grow you and increase your capacity. And I feel like there's something on this conversation today that even by girls listening, supernaturally, that the Lord is going to open up places in their mind, in their heart, in their life for them to be able to do more, but not like the type of do more to wear themselves out, but to do more like effectively and efficiently. And so I'm going to take our conversation along those lines. So how has leaning into stretching seasons in your life helped you grow and develop you into the woman that you are today?
That stretch. It's the word that none of us want.
Exactly.
We want the fruit of it and the promise of the stretch. We don't want the process of the stretch.
You're right.
But the process is where all the gold is. It's where all the good is. And so I really think that we can overcomplicate it sometimes. I feel like on the other side of saying yes to the process and trusting him in the process is the gold. But I feel like sometimes we're so focused on that promise that when it's not coming in the timing or the ease with which we would want it, we, again, like we talked about earlier, we give up and we run away because we don't like the process. But I feel like, leading in this church, being led in this church by incredible leaders like y'all, and moving to a different country, being a mom, and also running in ministry and getting to love on other people, being a wife, friend, all of those things. I feel like sometimes you could hear comments of like, how do you do that all? Or how is that? And it really, I feel like we can overcomplicate it it's literally just saying yes to the next step that God has asked us, and trusting that the next thing, the next level of capacity, the next calling does not mean that we have to lay the other one down. If that makes sense.
Yes.
You know, I've asked you to be a mom and a wife. You don't have to choose. You don't have to lay down being a wife in order to step into being a mom.
So good.
You know, you don't have to lay down running in ministry and building the church. We've seen you and Pastor Earl do this so beautifully, and also continue to love on your incredible kids and be so present with your family. And so I feel like it's saying yes to the next step and not getting too in our heads.
That's so good.
About like, oh, but wait a minute, this means
this?
I must have to subtract this in order to get here. And it's kingdom math. Trust him and take the next step. And capacity is a holy supernatural thing. It's not something that we have to make okay and make sense in our minds.
Gold, again, just gold. You could be a professor, just all the wisdom that comes out of you. Professor Whitney.
Oh my goodness.
How would you define capacity, and why do you feel it's important in leadership?
Yeah. Capacity. The scripture that I think of when I think of capacity is, I think it was Elisha, right? With the widow in the jars, the widow in the jars of oil. And, you know, God is going to do a miracle of provision, but Elisha is telling her, hey, you have to go get more jars and you have to go get more vessels. And I feel like that's a beautiful picture of what capacity is in our own lives and why it's important. It's not that we have to just strive and kill ourselves in order to produce the oil, the miracle, the relationships, the ministry, the obedience. The oil, the good stuff, the powerful stuff comes from God. But there is a piece in which he's asking us to say yes to having, you know, the jar, the vessels ready so that he can do a work. And so I feel like one area that capacity is so important is he has the power, he has the miracle, but if we're not showing up to be available and to allow him to flow through us, that oil's going to stop flowing, just like it did as, you know, there was no more jars, there's no more oil. And so, but at the same time, we can go too far the other direction, I think, too, and think that capacity is about striving. And capacity is about killing ourselves or meeting the expectations of others or keeping up with someone else in comparison. But that's really not what it is. It's being obedient to allow, as his power's flowing, to be available for him to flow through us.
And that's the key, him flowing through us, not us doing it in our own strength, which is such a fine line, because I feel like a lot of the girls that listen to this are like leaders and bosses and just good at what they do. And when you're good at what you do, you can sometimes be so quick to lean on yourself instead of leaning on God, which that's why we get tired. And that's why we get to the end of ourselves.
And we can feel like failures. Or just, I feel like not good enough is something that all of us can relate to so much.
Yes, for sure.
Just not enough.
Not enough,
And I really feel like we're maybe not understanding what God is actually asking of us, what capacity actually is, because the truth is we're not, but we're not alone. You know, it's
actually good to be not enough.
It is good. Like, that's something to celebrate. Like, I'm not enough to be a mom and a wife and lead and, you know, do all the things that God's asking us to do, but he's so faithful. Like, he knows and he wants to provide. And when he asks us to do something, he's like, I'm going to make sure you have what you need to do it, but will you show up and will you be available? So there's so much freedom, I feel like, from understanding
that it's not just us.
It's not just on our shoulders. Thank you, Jesus.
Thank God.
Thank God.
I don't want to.
I don't want it.
Not without him.
No.
Okay, there's some more really good questions. Let's see. I'm going to rattle some of them off. What are some signs that someone is operating at their current capacity and needs to grow? That's a good question.
That's good.
What are some practical ways to intentionally grow and expand your capacity? I feel like those are similar. What would you say to someone who feels overwhelmed and unsure if they have capacity for what God is calling them to do? That's a good one. Talk about a time when you didn't feel like you could lead, speaking to someone's life and courage, and what did you do to rise above and step into what God was calling you to be?
Wow.
I think we do that one. I think we do that one. Yeah. So when was a time you didn't feel like you could do blank? It was like either lead or speak it to the girls or to the church.
That's a great question.
And what did you do to rise above?
I can remember, there's so many moments, honestly. Yes. I feel like we all have those moments. We were talking about this not long ago. There's a moment after the birth of one of my kids where I actually went through a lot of anxiety. And it's not something that I had ever experienced before. You know, heard of it, talked to other people who had struggled with it. But it's nothing like facing it yourself when you get to realize, oh, okay, this is very real. And I remember thinking, I don't know, you know, with the anxiety and the fear, inability for me specifically, it played out in inability to sleep, you know, just thoughts running through my head and questioning, is this ever going to get better? Am I going to feel like this forever? But I do remember feeling specifically in some of those nights, some of those moments, I don't know if I can do this. Like, and this being any of it. Any of it. Like, I don't know. I want to. I desire to. I don't know if I'm physically able or emotionally available or able to, you know, love and pour out on other people, be all that I want to be for my kids and show up 100% for them. And so I remember that was one of my biggest fears is being like, I don't know. And God, I need a miracle. I need you to show up. But I feel like looking back, what we really did, and Nate walked alongside me, you and Pastor Earl walked alongside us so beautifully, and we're so grateful. But really what we did in that moment was, number one, remember, okay, God, has anything changed? Have you called us to do anything differently? I feel a lot different right now. But what is it that you see? And I remember hearing in my heart and spirit, nothing has changed. Like, we have called you to be here. I have good plans for you. I love you. You know, hearing all the truths of what God says about us. And it was honestly hard to hear that. I think part of me was like, are you sure?
Right. Yes.
Because I feel so different. But, you know, asking, has anything changed? But then from there, continuing in obedience, clinging to hope, and of course, praying for healing. But I really believe, looking back on it, number one, God is just good. And he did bring healing after a process. It was not instant and it was not all at once. But continuing in obedience, continuing in showing up for my kids and, you know, allowing the Holy Spirit to give me the strength to do that, continuing in serving others and showing up in building the church, even when in moments it felt like this is the last thing I have capacity for. But I actually feel like in leaning in and continuing to obey, he even used that in the healing, if that makes sense. Like moments of being in church when I was like, I don't know if I have the emotional capacity with this anxiety to lead and love people. But looking back on those moments, I was like, that was exactly where I needed to be. I didn't need to just be at home in my head. I needed to be in the presence of God and in his house. And so I feel like so often when we face something that we're like, this is about to take me out of whatever it is, you know, often the thing that we feel the least like we want to do is the thing that God is going to use to heal us and to grow us in it and shape us in it. So,
which is so rich. And I do think, you know, I talked about this at the beginning of our conversation. I feel like culture and our own thoughts would tell us, well, actually, you don't need to go to church. We give ourselves passes and outs, and it makes sense. Like if you were to call a friend and say, you know, Jen, you know, I'm not feeling good today. You run church. She would be like, okay, you're not feeling good today. You know what I'm saying? And so we can say the right thing to tee up the people in our life to also co-sign on our feeling. And sometimes it's actually not healthy for us to be alone and to isolate ourselves. Because you could have like not come and had every excuse. You just had a baby. You were like, had this crazy cough that would like not leave. It like held on forever. And then you add not sleeping and anxiety on top of that. You had every reason to be like, I'm just like going to check out and like get the recording. But it is wild that you decided to still go. And I feel like you're the woman that you are because you got in God's house.
The healing he brought, I mean, it's all him. But I often think, again, we get so psyched out and we allow ourselves to be taken out because we're trying to self-preserve. Or again, like you're saying, trying to, you know, surround ourselves with people who make us feel good to stay in a pit or stay where we are, stay in a place we don't need to be. And I'm so incredibly grateful. I'm so incredibly grateful that in the moments that I was tempted to be like, I don't think we can do this, that I kept taking a step for that. You prayed over me, encouraged me to keep going and running. Because now, again, I'm not the same person I was before that.
Wow.
I never would have asked for that. Wouldn't want to go through that again.
Yes, right.
But also I see that God has built something new in me, new in our marriage, new in the way that I love kids, new in the way that I'm able to walk alongside other people who are going through something similar.
Yes.
And so he's just so good and so faithful in those low moments.
Yep.
But I do feel like if I could just encourage some of the girls, if you're in that moment where you feel like, I can't do this, I think I'm going to throw in the towel. God maybe asked me to do this once, but he doesn't want me to keep going when it's this hard. I would just encourage you, keep obeying. Allow him to hold you up. Allow him to be your strength and your source. Allow him to speak life over you. Keep taking steps of obedience, even when it's the last thing you want to do, because he is creating something in you. He's birthing something in you, I would even say. And as you stay the course, he is so worthy to be trusted that the fruit that you're going to see on the other side of your obedience is something you cannot even imagine, but just stay the course and trust him. He is going to hold you up. He is going to heal you. He is going to use it for your good. And so just keep going. Don't throw in the towel.
Well then, that was holy. That was profound. And someone who feels like they can't get out of bed today, someone who feels like they're not enough, someone who feels like, why does this postpartum anxiety trying to take me out? Or why is this fear trying to take me out? Or is someone going to break up with me again? Is my heart going to get broken again? I lost my last job. Am I going to lose this job? Like all those lies that swirl around in our heads, I feel like you just spoke to them directly. And I'm believing that even as girls hear this conversation, they're going to walk in a new freedom. And here's the thing, like if any kind of holy impartation could come off of this conversation, it's my prayer that we would raise up a generation of women who don't quit and who can't be talked out of. Like, get me to God's house. Like, I'm just praying even as I'm speaking that like something prophetic is waking up on the inside of the girls listening that like, you can't talk me out of being in church. Like you can talk me out of it. Okay, my feelings got hurt. I was supposed to serve. I was supposed to be the director of that such and such serve team. They picked somebody else. You can't talk me out of it. My best friend goes to that church. We're no longer friends. You can't talk me out of it. My ex-boyfriend, I'm going to run into him at church. You can't talk me out of it. I don't ever get to sing. I tried out for the worship team. They didn't choose me. You can't talk me out of it. Like I am praying that we would be those kind of like gangster, strong, fierce women of God that like, because here's the deal. I think about our kids, for those of us that are moms that are listening to this conversation. When our kids see us not quit and when our kids see us race to God's house, guess what? Eventually they start racing to God's house. I think about my oldest son, Parker, like right now, you know, he's become and becoming, you know, he's still on the journey, still on the potter's wheel. All my kids are, but I feel like he's stepping into who we've prayed for him to be. And now to this day, he is a countdown. He can't wait to be at church. Like he cannot wait to be at church. But I think in part it's because he was raised by a family who couldn't wait to be at church. And then he met mentors at church who couldn't wait to be at church. And so now even in college, like he loves coming home on the weekends and being in God's house. And I think we forget that there's other people watching us fight. And I think sometimes people think, well, I'm not in a season to give out. Okay, well, don't give out. Just show up then. Just like come and be in the building and say hi to the person next to you. That can be your serving.
Like don't let yourself get taken out.
Exactly.
Don't let yourself get taken out of the game. Even if it's like less than what you were doing before. Don't just cut it off. Don't isolate yourself. Don't live in offense. Don't live thinking that you're justified in either isolation or cutting off or saying, I'm just focusing on this right now because what God has is so much better for you.
So much better.
And he's going to use even the hard things to grow you and make you into all he's called you to be.
Beautiful. Well, beautiful. I think we could end right there. Loved getting to hang out with you. I could talk to you for hours.
Same.
You're a wealth of wisdom and pure gold. And I feel like this conversation was marked by God. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, girls, for hanging out with us today. We will see you next time. Have the best rest of your day.
Love you guys.